Hey, how's it going? YouTube family, it's K right here. Once again, I have Mr. Libertarian Scott back up on the channel, and yeah, pretty much I just have a basic show just to talk about various topics and just like catch up with like Scott on just like a multitude of things. So, how's everything with you, Scott?
Yeah, things are very good. And yeah, can't say I've been doing too much, just studying stuff like that from the side. But yeah, things are well.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you in terms of like what's been going on in terms of I guess at the current, like events because last time that I've had like a conversation with you, me and you talked about like a whole bunch of various topics, but I wanted to like, get like your point with like, how do you see I guess at the state of like the current like events that are going on because I've been like seeing that there's like a lot of how should I say like in terms of like economic situations globally. Do you think that there's like a certain like a certain turn point of maybe I would say socio-political issues that are going on?
I think in terms of what you're talking about, it's probably to do with the current events with the riots. Am I correct?
Yeah, I was actually curious to ask you like about that because I heard something like about that, I believe in the UK or something like that.
Well, this is the thing because it kind of reminds me of the whole situation, even with the build up to the Scottish independence referendum, because I personally felt that there wasn't really anything worthwhile. Um, and I don't subscribe to the whole thing over, the nationalism and unionism. I just thought it was a complete waste of time on that particular topic issue. And the reason why this correlates is because the issue being is that a lot of people in society think that they're voting for change, but they're not voting for change at all. Because all they're doing is they're supporting exactly what it is that led them into the mess in the first place. Most people are sympathetic of the mixed economy, and this is how see so long as folk continue to depend upon the state, they're never going to get a government to serve them. But they seem to think that they can. It's that whole saying again where they just seem to do the same thing or and then expect different results, and it never happens. It's the same thing or and or. And I just read a post earlier on. And funny enough, I think it was in correlation to do with the so-called far right that they're putting out in the mainstream media, and something to do with Tommy Robinson or that. and
Oh yeah.
and I saw in the national, newspaper, which is supposedly a paper for the sake of Scottish independence and all the rest of this. But I seen one of the posts earlier on. I think no, in fact, it wasn't about Tommy Robinson. It was about something to do with the fact that the Labour Party were voted in, and yet the Labour Party are no living up to what they thought they were going to get because they voted for Labour thinking that they were going to get change. And I responded by a comment and I says to them, well, what the hell were they expecting? It doesn't matter whether they vote for SNP or vote for Labour. They're not going to get change. And even when you try to offer them the solution to the problem, they hit you with vitriol. They don't like it. Because the truth of the matter is, a lot of people in society have been brainwashed to basically hate everything that fixes them, but they support everything that they're complaining about. So it's a bit like watching the dog. It chases its own tail, running round in circles. It's gone nowhere. Do you understand what I mean? It's like, I mean, how are you supposed to fix a problem if you're standing against the solution? And they can't see that. It's a bit like that belief that they've got where they went around saying, oh, well, deregulation caused the banking crisis. Well, in reality, that isn't the case. Deregulation did not cause the banking crisis because the Financial Services Authority, who were the UK banking regulator, their handbook was more than 10,500 pages long in the regulations. They don't understand that. They can't. They think it was some sort of unregulated market, and so what you've got is a population who are largely clueless in a lot of the things. That's not to say everybody, especially in those protests, and this is the point I'm getting at, because here's the issue. What you've got in society is populism and a nationalist movement, right? And they claim that they're anti-establishment. That's all well said and done. Now, I can agree with some of the things that they're talking about. For example, they'll complain about the mainstream media no being for them, but instead a mainstream media that's corrupt and basically all for themselves. Or they might complain about that today with a self-serving government. And if it's not complaining about that, they'll complain about the corrupt judicial system. Right, fair enough. And I understand that. And I understand that they're complaining about a two-tier police system. That is to say that what's been going on here in the United Kingdom is you're seeing that part of cultural Marxism, right? Where you'll see those that are coming into this country and they're getting special treatment and they get away with all sorts. But the moment British people go out protesting, you know, it's a whole different matter. They're targeted like, you know, nothing else, right? Because I've watched it myself, admittedly, so, and I'm not somebody that agrees with all these, you know, violent protests. I don't think that solves anything, because all that does is it gives ammunition for, you know, the socialists to then use against them. That's all it's doing. It's fixing a problem. It's creating a bigger problem, so to speak. It's basically it's giving them ammunition to then turn around and say, "Oh, look, this is what the far right's like. They're dangerous," which is quite funny to say the least. Because you'll remember everything today with the Black Lives Matter protests, with the Antifa and stuff like that, where they're burning and looting businesses and all sorts. that
Yeah.
that to me, that to me shows the double standards of these people. But that's the issue, because whilst I can understand that they will complain about the self-serving government and all the rest of that, my issue with these populists, like for example Tommy Robinson and so many of these followers, it's not that they're complaining about those things, because I would agree with them on those things, right? It's the fact that at the other end, when you go away from those issues, like complaining about the self-serving government, etc., what is it that these people are supporting? Let's get a fair reflection, because this is a sad reality, right? Let's get a fair reflection. When you look at the Reform Party, right, which is meant to be this third party alternative, and the alternative for the populists against the so-called establishment. Okay, fair enough. They're going to make certain reforms, and I can understand that, and that's good, and what have you. But see, one of the policies, or let's just say it's not. I don't know if you consider it one policy, but see, one of the things that's written into their, book was put out to people to say why to vote them. It was basically the words protecting public services. I don't think these people realise. I don't think they understand. The reason why they've basically got this corporatist system the day is because that is the natural state of a mixed economy. Now, whether they like that fact or not, it's the truth. And many folk don't want to accept that truth. They want to cling on for dear life to this imaginary, fantasy world, this bubble they want to live in, this fantasy world where they think they can somehow have this striking right balance between capitalism and socialism that they call it.
Yeah.
The reality of what follows it. It's just it's like what Ludwig von Mises had written about the middle of the road, or F.A. Hayek about the road to serfdom, that all you're getting with the middle of the road and this dependency upon the government, all you're really getting is a government that basically goes on the path of its own. The government just goes on the road of its own, and it always will. Because you're gaining the power to tax you. I mean, you get the power to tax you about at least 40 odd %. You get the power to take a lot of your money away. And you end up depending upon it for things like healthcare, education, fire service, the police, etc. What is it you're effectively doing? Well, number one, when it comes to healthcare, you're basically putting your health into the hands of the state, because that's essentially what that's what public ownership is. It's not people ownership; it's government ownership. So you're putting your health, the dependency of your health, into the hands of government. Likewise, it's the same story with education. You're putting dependency into the hands of government for then government to basically be the monopoly holder or information that it feeds people. After all, it's the government that owns the information that feeds through that education system collectively. It's not a case of, some competitive market with, choice like you would get in like through a free market and an education system. And I don't get me wrong, I can understand these people that turn around and complain about certain private sector costs, what they've got the day. And I've beat this to death where I've spoken at length about the main American healthcare market. And I say the key word there, main American healthcare market, because a lot of people have no really got an understanding that the United States of America is actually get two healthcare systems. Most folk don't even know that. And I can understand their concerns, because they wouldn't want to end up with America's got with the soaring costs in the main American healthcare market, because a lot of folk can't afford it. And that's reasonable. I can understand where they're coming from in that respect. But they're shooting themselves in the foot. They're pointing at the gun down at their foot, and they're shooting themselves right in the foot. Because they don't understand the economics to comprehend the colossal difference between fake private ownership and true private ownership. And when you try to explain that to certain folk, they've got this emotional reaction where they don't want to listen. They try to monopolise the argument down to this argument between you've either got nationalisation or some sort of strangely government regulated private sector, and that's it. They kind of just brush the free market option under the carpet and pretend that doesn't exist. And this is the thing, because going back to that point on the Reform Party protecting public services, this is because if they were a staunch free market party and put out staunch free market policies, they would barely win any votes. And that's the harsh reality, because what that's indicating to you is that the majority of folk in society are basically they're basically quasi. I hate saying it. I'm not saying it to be derogatory, but they are subconsciously quasi-socialist, and they don't realise that. So whilst they may say socialism, this is the other point, whilst they may say that socialism doesn't work, the bottom line is, I guarantee you that if you were to go around the majority of these type of people, they don't really understand socialism to such an extent. Sure, they might acknowledge the fact that communism was a disaster and that the Soviet Union was a catastrophic failure and led to extreme poverty and millions died. I mean, okay, they might understand basic things like that. However, if you were to ask them why it failed, they don't understand that. And you can see that evidenced by their support of government price fixing. In fact, many people were supporting price caps, what they call here in the UK, what you would call price ceilings in the United States. They're supporting price caps on things like gas and electricity. And it's like, do these people not understand that it's the price ceilings in history that resulted in the price shortage problems and all that? That's the issue. They say that they oppose socialism, but when you dig deep behind what they believe in, what they support, actions speak louder than words, because they want to protect these public services. They believe in these price, controls and stuff like that, because they don't understand the economics. They don't comprehend what the economic calculation problem is. They couldn't tell you what the knowledge problem is. They couldn't tell you any of that stuff. So effectively, what they're doing is like the dog that chases its own tail round and round in circles. It's like that with these people, because the majority of folk say that they oppose the establishment, but they end up continuing supporting exactly what led to the self-serving government and corrupt mainstream media and corrupt judicial system in the first place.
Yeah. I was just going to bring my point of view into I just don't know if it's probably turning into a nightmarish reality, but like as far as like the state of the US like economy, like I'm a little bit like afraid that this country is kind of like going into like maybe like light version USSR level type of inflation. And the only reason why like I say that is simply because I'm now starting to see that the evils of socialism can easily prop up very quickly to you when things start to become more scarce, and as the state continues to expand its you know iron fist more, it seems to be more of a harsher reality for people to grasp. Therefore, you have this weird mindset that people carry to say like everything's like going to be fine, like things are not going to like quote unquote like affect me too harder. But as the state continues to get larger and larger, I think that the level of corruption tends to be hidden to a
Mm-hmm.
degree until degree until people start seeing people dying, and then they're like, okay, now this is like a big problem. But then it's like at what point will you start to wake up, and
Yeah.
how can you fight up against that, so therefore your life is not put under that means of danger? Because I think
Yeah, I
that
mean,
that's yeah.
I completely agree with what you're saying there. I mean, it's see, I've long argued that the biggest damage that's caused by socialism isn't its, in other words, the worst. What I'm saying is, what the worst part of socialism is not its failure. Believe it or not, it's not its failure. The worst part of socialism is, let's use the NHS as a prime example.
Yep.
All the way through the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, 80s, 90s, you can find hundreds, literally, and I'm not joking, hundreds of these newspaper articles dating back all the way through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and it's the same recurring theme and stories that prop up about the chronic hospital bed shortages, chronic staff shortages, long waiting lines, you know, all those problems that existed all the way through its history. In other words, the reason why socialism is so damaging is because it's a cult. In other words, it doesn't matter how bad it gets. Honestly, it doesn't matter how severely bad it gets. Its proponents use up excuses religiously for it. And you see that every single time. These socialist regimes where they've always got to try and find a scapegoat. Now, I don't like flinging around the word narcissist loosely because it's to a specific type of group of people, and I don't think you can, label everybody a narcissist, but there is something frighteningly accurate when you look at the red flag traits of a narcissist when it comes to socialists. One of those things is projectionism. Oh, it definitely is, and you see this, and they've done it every single time. It reminds you going back to the days of the Soviet Union in its honeymoon period in the 1930s, where if socialism created a problem, they've got to try and push the blame off onto somebody else. That it's no their fault. It's no the fault of socialism. It's got to be somebody that failed socialism, if you know what I mean. So they end up killing them. And that's what the Soviet Union was like. That's what's the worst part of socialism. And you've seen this whether you talk about Cuba or Venezuela or Chile. What did they all have in common? Look, I wouldn't go as far as to say that the United States of America is this capitalist country, right? Maybe if you draw in a comparison of scale compared to some countries like Cuba or North Korea. But when you look at it, what did all three of those countries have in common? First and foremost, there was the game of projectionism. In other words, it was always the United States of America's fault. They're always using the scapegoat. It's always the United States of America's fault. In other words, when it came to Chile in the early 1970s, after the mess that Communist Allende caused through all these price and wage controls and stuff like that, and basically causing inflation. Now, this proves that they don't even understand what inflation means. It's caused through running the printing press. That's why they drove into hyperinflation, and yet they're trying to say, oh, well, that's all the United States of America's fault. How is it? It's not the United States of America that that prints their currency. You know what I mean? So,
Unless it's coming from the IMF, I guess.
that's the thing. and that's the thing, because they've always got that scapegoat where they try to blame the United States. No, I don't. You know, the United States isn't perfect, and nobody would ever claim that it is. But they've always got to find that excuse, and that's what the major problem is. Because going back to your point, how bad are things going to get in order for these people to waken up? Well, that's the problem. Because here am I, sitting today in Scotland, right? Now, whether you're aware of this or no, the NHS in Scotland is a devolved issue. That basically means that the NHS in Scotland is fully run by the Scottish Government and funded by the Scottish Government and not by the UK. It's separate, right? The Scottish Government's fully responsible for the NHS. I remember in the Politics Today show, a UK politics programme, this was back in 2019, before the lockdowns, which is also important. I remember an SNP MSP, a member of the Scottish Parliament, the Scottish National Party, had sat on the Politics Today show and stated that because of the long waiting lines that they were being faced with, they began contracting out to private companies, right? In other words, they began bringing in those private initiatives and stuff like that, because the problem of what it's been faced with. Now, this is the point. These people in one hand would sit there and say, oh yes, the NHS is the greatest healthcare system in the world, right? Right, and maybe they're discussing with one another. But the moment that you force them into a position and maybe in a different day, and you're having a different discussion with those same people, and you force them into the position of saying, well, the NHS has been faced with this, and that, and all these long waiting lines, blah, 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 they'll then contradict themselves and then turn around and say to you, oh, it's only failing because, well, hold on a wee second here. It's only failing because I thought the other day you were saying that it's the greatest healthcare system in the world. That's the point. These people are never consistent because they're not telling people the truth. It's not till you put them on the spot. It's not till you put them on the spot that they're forced to concede. That whole thing telling you that the NHS is this, that, and the next thing, it's so wonderful. So wonderful. You know, more than 9,000, this is the truth, by the way, more than 9,000 avoidable cancer patient deaths happen every single year because of the NHS. More than 9,000 people, avoidable. That's avoidable. That's not even talking about all those that have got, that are, in the other category, and also facing heart disease, etc., etc. It's in the thousands, right? So, and one of the things that they kept on saying was that the NHS is available for everyone. That was the rhetoric behind it, and that it's more affordable. They kept repeating that, and when you cast it up in their face, they play the game of whataboutery, where they say, well, if you don't like the NHS, why don't you go live in America and experience their healthcare costs? And I'm like, well, and this is where I put them on the spot, because I say, well, if you're going on about the main American healthcare market, why don't you sit there and explain to me what the American Medical Association monopoly is of 1904? Why don't you sit and explain to me what the third-party payer system is and what that caused with a collusion between the giant pharmaceutical companies? Of course, they don't want to touch upon any of that because they don't have a clue about any of that stuff. And I had an argument on that the other day, but here's the point. The point is that despite what a colossal failure the NHS has been, despite how extremely poor that it is, these same people are still in the state of denial. They're still in the state of, oh, well, we need more funding. They've been saying that for decades, and that's what's been done for decades. What do they think? And they said, when the Conservative Party were in, they were saying that, oh, well, the NHS is underfunded. That's nonsense. Because if you were to look at the real spending into the NHS in the past decade, it's at an all-time high. It's increased. It was stagnant for about 2010 to about 2013, right? It was stagnant, and then it went on a vast increase, right? A vast increase in spending and real expenditure into the NHS, which is telling you that all they're doing, like they've done each passing decade, is just use up excuses. And that's the point, because when you talk about the United States and the problem that they're being faced with, and the issue where these people are going to waking up, well, that's exactly it. Because you look at these people and you think to yourself, what's it going to seriously take for these type of people to seriously open their eyes and actually pay attention and listen to what folk are telling them? And it's just like something I shared earlier on there. It was a post where this, woman who's got pink hair or something like that, and she says something about a child should have full say on something to do with the change of nappies or something like that. I don't know what it was, but you can tell that these people are basically just saying things purely in spite of their opposition. So, in other words, I think I seriously believe it's a mental health problem, and I'm not saying that to be nasty. I'm saying it because it's the truth. Because it really is difficult, because these people, it's a bit like if you say the sky is blue, they'll say the sky is green. If you say the grass is green, they'll say the grass is orange. Right? You understand the point I'm getting at? They'll simply take any sort of position just in spite of you, right? And it really is all about feelings. It reminds me of that American lassie. I remember she was out protesting, and she started screaming and shouting. And she said, no, feelings are real. Feelings are real. Feelings matter. Feelings are facts. I don't think these people understand that their feelings mean nothing. And those consequences, that their actions do have serious consequences when it comes to economic reality. That in economics as a study, it doesn't have feelings at all. And that's the number one thing that a lot of folk don't get. You know, and that's a big problem. So that's the issue. It's like getting people in the United States to understand that it's doing a dark path, because Britain faced a heavy nationalisation before Margaret Thatcher, and the economy was in tatters. Right, the economy was on its arse. That's the truth of it. Our economy was in dire straits, and even despite that fact, these people somehow could not see that it was the fault of socialism. So if they couldn't see that was the fault of socialism, and they're still valuing it today in Scotland, for example, then what can you do? You know what I mean? You try to get through to these people, but it seems nigh impossible a lot of the time. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. I was just gonna chime in to say, I think it's literally due to the brainwashing of what the Marxists, um, I would say detractors that are trying to push like the mindset of, ignoring economic theory and just going with feelings and, you know, um, I would say like demonic destitution in a way, because I see it in America where you have a lot of people that don't care about what's going on in like the U.S. Like economy, and then they'll just say, "Oh, well, that's just like quote unquote late stage capitalism coming from like commies." But then other people would say, i.e., conservatives saying, "Oh, well, this is simply due to some means of you know certain regulation slash deregulation that's causing." Certain means to be good and bad. But I just simply think it's just simply due to government overreach, where that the state is getting more power by pushing for
Mm.
regulatory capture, and therefore you're seeing that the bad like effects of socialist takeover that can easily take over, because
Mm.
like you said about like the whole populism thing, I think that
Yeah.
easily takes over within any authoritarian like level country, that like that's shifting away from like a first world to like a second world type of like presence. And I think that is what gives the state more incentive to do bad things, to push that that type of population to philosophically believe that it is okay to advocate for more government, like a government based intrusion to
Mm.
affect your life more, to make it harder for you to live. So therefore, people would use a lot of utilitarian based ideals to say like, oh, well, this is okay because everybody else is benefiting. But if you're not benefiting, then pack your bags and leave. And like that's simply a a consequentialist base of like base argument to put out there, to say that you don't care about what happens to like your neighbor. You just care about if like the collective benefits you, like no matter how many people suffer, then that's how everybody should basically live like.
Mm. See, another, because this is quite an interesting point in correlation to that, is, something you've got to watch for. Um, Something that you've got to watch for is the fact that, and I try to remind myself of this. I always try to remind myself of this, because mainstream media can make it seem like conservatives and libertarian type thinkers are a minority, and Scotland is a fantastic example of this, because you can think of the Scottish National Party, right? Scottish National Party are this party that's, right, they consider themselves moderates, but they're very strongly socialist in the sense that all these policies that show for this, right? In other words, they're very strongly anti-capitalist, so to speak. Now, they will put out rhetoric in the mainstream media, just like recently, the former Prime Minister, no, sorry, former First Minister, I should say, who was, the First Minister of Scotland. You might remember him because he was the one who went on about how we're white or something like that, which is laughable. Anyway, so this guy is just recently coming out and banging off about the so-called far right, right? Now, the way the mainstream media will put things across, and just like the Scottish National Party, because they convey themselves through the mainstream media, they'll make Scotland sound as if we're off far left or something, we're somehow strongly socialist. I'll tell you something. See, when it comes to canvassing and people that go out chapping at people's doors, that type of stuff, away from the mainstream media, you'll actually find that a lot of people are a lot more conservative than what the media's having you believe. And I think the reason why I bring that point up is because I strongly believe that that is the case in the United States today. And I'm not just saying this, I don't think that Joe Biden was voted unfair. I don't believe he was. I honestly, knowing how corrupt the system is, knowing how corrupt it is, I do not believe for a second that the majority had voted him in, that Joe Biden. I don't, right? Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there's no a problem. There's no you look how many brainwashed folk there is, sadly it's a case, right? But something tells me there are a lot of people out there that you just don't see because the mainstream media don't really cover it. There's probably a hell of a lot of people out there in the United States today who would no doubt agree with you. You know what I mean? They no doubt would. And another thing you've got to remember is social media restricts your access to who you can reach out to in terms of your content. I would know this. When I was posting my videos, for example, and I would share them onto Facebook, I'd post a copy of it up to Facebook. Now, that page, Libertarian Scott on Facebook, was inactive for such a lengthy period of time. And when I started posting, it started seeing growth for a bit. Then after about a month or something, it started getting into decline. I was looking at it thinking to myself, what's that all about? Why is that happening? It's because of the fact that you just know for a fact that those in big tech, just like what came out about Twitter files, remember when Elon Musk had first taken over Twitter? And you'll remember the whole thing of Twitter files. Now, we predicted that long before he even took over. We predicted all that. As soon as he takes on and it all comes out, You just know that YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, you know, all these platforms will be doing exactly that. There's no question about it. It's, in other words, I do believe that there are a lot of people out there who probably in larger numbers would agree with you. But I think the I think that the system is corrupt. Well, I don't think the system's corrupt, but it's just same here in Britain. It's it's just it's the way things are. I really don't. I don't trust them for as far as I can throw a stick.
Yeah. Um, I'm just mostly worried about, just like the hyper like inflation, because it's just like I think simply like, like I'll just use Florida as like a great example. If it ever gets worse enough to at the point where people are still having to pay like 3,000 or higher just to get, like your own like apartment, then I just think as far as like the generation that I'm in, you're never gonna get yourself like a house, and
Yeah,
you're never gonna be
same
able
here.
to. Yeah. Like you're never going to be able to have like your own family, in which a lot of people are doing that right now, and that's already gonna be failing. It's just like, at what point do people just understand, like, when that level hits, it's just gonna be like, I think like sadly, if that level of destitution does hit, do you think that that would be like a breaking point to be a like a, how should I say, like a failing, you know like I would say like a failing path that would cause like the Western world to like basically disintegrate into some form of I guess like
I think
yeah.
I think what it is that you're going to get a lot of folk who will start listening. You will get folk who will start listening to people like myself who's been telling them what inflation is and stuff like that. They will start listening. Um, See, the trouble is you're going to get a specific group of these type of people who will turn around and then try and blame it on capitalism. It's just always the same. Right? They're predictable, and those type of people have just get one agenda, and it's basically socialism, right? You're never going to get through to those type of people. You'll find that a lot of folk in society who just go about their daily life. For example, they don't have anything at all to do with politics. They don't have anything at all to do with, watching all those political shows and stuff like that. They don't really care as such. They just go about their daily life, perhaps watch their favourite sports team or something like that, or who knows whether it's watching Teletubbies. But despite whatever it is that folk basically love doing, you've got a lot of those people who I firmly believe those are the ones I strongly believe will start to sit up and really listen to you. They will. Because once it starts really affecting their life personally, then they begin to look for answers. There's no question about it. And the reason why I don't worry too much is because, in a sense, or not, in fact, not even in a sense, we've got the upper hand. The reason why we got the upper hand, or the the socialists, the reason why we got the upper hand is simply because economics and history is on our side. It's not on their side. You know what I mean? Economics is something that's strongly against them. It's, economics and economic history has proven so clear as day that what they are shouting for, they've not got an example anywhere in the world to show for where socialism ever led to prosperity. Never. And so that's the reason why when it comes to the average people who might know any better, those are the people who will sit up and listen to you. And I think they do make up the majority. Of course, the mainstream media might not make it seem that way, but I do firmly believe those people are the majority. At the moment, you consider them as moderates. They might support this mixed economy and stuff like that because perhaps don't understand. But many of them certainly will sit up and listen to you once things get bad. Because look at, for example, don't get me wrong, you might go through perhaps a lengthy period of that mess first and foremost, like what happened in Argentina for a few decades or something like that. You've got to hope that it doesn't last that long. But look at how people began to seek an alternative. Now, I'm not saying this guy merely because I don't know what's going on there. To say the least, I've not got a clue in terms of Javier Melee. I don't know. I've been getting mixed messages on the guy, but people will look for alternatives when it gets that bad, and I can understand because the 2020 lockdowns was bad because inflation was already bad enough as it was. I mean, a lot of folk don't realise we weren't over the 2008 financial crisis. Even in 2018, we weren't over the 2008 financial crisis. All they did was just kick the can down the road. That's all they did. They kicked the can down the road and escalated the problem by simply resorting to bailouts that people who don't know any better, people thought that was their saviour. And it wasn't. It just escalated the problem. It just kicked the can down the road. And that's a massive problem because inflation was already bad enough as it was. And then the 2020 lockdowns came around, which basically meant a lot of the private sector was locked down for a good part of a year. Now, Florida is a bit of an exception because I do remember Florida, I think it was something to do with that they pulled away from was it the mask mandate or something like that? They came out of that, a lot earlier. I think it was like September. I think Tom Woods had touched upon it. I can't even remember specifically, but and this is the thing because when you lock down private sector for a lengthy period of time, and even for a year, for crying out loud, where's the money coming from to follow the temporarily out of work private businesses? Well, it comes directly from the Federal Reserve running the printing press. And the amount that the Federal Reserve printed in that 1 year, in that time span, exceeded anything that it had done over a long period of time. It's frightening when you look at it. And given the fact that following the lockdowns, you ended up with a president like Joe Biden. I mean, my God, man. it was inevitable that things were going to. You just it's just like how people voted in the Labour Party, and people thought that they were going to get different. They just don't get it. They don't seem to get it. They're not going to get change in that. They're not going to get changed in that sort of thing. And look, I'm not saying that Donald Trump was perfect, because he reallocated spending from one area of the economy into another area of the economy. But he, when you compare him, right, to Joe Biden, I wouldn't even need to tell you, man.
Hey, if Donald Trump goes into the like less authoritarian mode and just go pure business mode, then all we need is just free food for McDonald's every Monday, and then we get a pay boost every Friday. So that means after your you finish like your work week at your job, you can get like a $500 pay bonus, called Trump bucks.
That's the thing, man. It's like and it's just one of these things. I can understand fully where you're coming from on that with regards to the inflation. It's a very bad problem, and that's the funny thing, because it's like I say, people thought that they were going to get different, like that with the Labour Party, and do you know what they're complaining about? The fact that there's cuts. In other words, people live in this fantasy world where they want this government in that will increase mere government borrowing and spending. They don't seem to understand that's what led to the economic crisis. They don't understand that, and that's a very serious problem. So they're caught in a cycle. You know what I mean? And it would take somebody who is a strong backbone. It's got courage to go in there and take action, regardless of what people are out there protesting. And I don't think that the current um, Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, I don't think he made matters any better when it came to those protests. Because how the protests came about is because these people are being put into these hotels, 5-star hotels, right? Basically getting everything to them on a plate. At the same time, because of the supply and demand issue of the immigration crisis, as you know, prices rise. That's just the reality of how things are because of the supply and demand issue. So you've got people who are struggling at the same time, and then you end up with all these attacks on the streets where and it's no, they can't turn around and say, oh well, it's the far right, because Ireland is a country like Scotland. In
Yep.
other words, Ireland is a country. Ireland is a country that has got a lot of people who are on the political left, right? And yet, you saw it yourself. You saw recent events where even the Irish are starting to come together. In fact, it's that bad. This is, and you might not understand it. I would, because I was born and brought up a Rangers supporter. The whole Rangers Celtic thing, the whole conflict, the whole Protestant Catholic thing, the whole, anyhow. and of course the political history behind the division. Ulster Unionists and those in the Republic and all the rest of this. There was a recent march showing people, both Unionists of the British Union in Ireland and people carrying the Irish tricolour, and they were standing together in protest of what's happening. In other words, because of all these terrorist attacks and stuff like that, it's basically done something that we've never seen in history. It's united. they've somehow managed to unite the Irish people, the Irish people together. They've managed to do something that's we've never seen before because of that issue, because of how serious it is. It's not just a problem that's existed in England. It's been a widespread problem, and the media and stuff like that are calling it far right. And this is the point, because, like I say, when Keir Starmer comes out and basically says it's the far right, all he's doing, he's stoking the flames. He really is stoking the flames. And yeah, although the Labour Party are in for another 5 years now because of how things are, who knows whether another election will come around sooner than that. I don't know. I don't have a clue. But they've pretty much shot themselves in the foot with that one, big time. Not just from an economic standpoint of view, but that like I say, the reason why people were complaining was not just because they're getting all that accommodation and stuff like that, whilst their taxpayers' money's paying for all that. It's the attacks, and then of course, other issues, the economic issues that play into all that. And because the Conservative Party promised after Brexit that they would solve these problems, they've not been solving the problem at all. So it's like, since Brexit, which was the beginning of 2020, what's happened in the past 3+ years, 3-4 years, it's just that the problem has get worse. And that's the reason why people were angry and just voted out the Conservatives in numbers in protest in favour of the Reform Party. So that's kind of where things are at, and that's why it escalated. Now, like I say, I don't particularly agree with riots. It never solves anything in particular, but something, I'm not surprised, because when you've got a government that's up its own backside and has not been listening to the people, this is basically what and the government stokes it as well. The government's stoking it, especially calling them far right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Government's instigating it.
Yeah, because I was shocked of what was happening over in Britain, because I was thinking well, that's just very strange, because it's like nobody never talked about it, and then I'm just looking into it, and it just seems like it's just like a bunch of crazy hearsay that people are trying to blame onto the wrong crowd of people, and it's clearly being instigated by the state, and I just think that's just like a level 1 insurrection, just to make things a lot much more worse and severe long term.
Yeah, and I remember that's the thing, and I remember even on the build up to the Brexit, right? This tells you how anti-democratic they are, right? on the build up to Brexit, and the referendum and everything, and then once people voted to leave and the results came in, they tried to kick the can down the road, right? Delayed it for three years. They delayed it for 3 years, made up excuses and all sorts. Do you know what they brought in as an excuse? The whole thing to do with a hard Brexit and a soft Brexit. There was no such thing. There was no hard Brexit or soft Brexit. It was just Brexit, right? That's what people voted for. There was nothing about a hard or soft. They just made that up. They just brought it in. And then they tried to kick the can down the road. And do you know what the political class in Westminster, and as well, of course, Holyrood of the Scottish government, do you know what they were turning around and saying? That the British people, that we didn't know what we were voting for, that we're too stupid, we didn't know what we were voting for. That's basically what they said. That's what they came out and said. In other words, they stare their nose down at us, and that really does sum up everything today with the political class. It really does sum them up to a T.
Yeah, that's just crazy because I've never seen anything like that. Well, I'm pretty sure it's happened in like the past, but it's just like, like it just seems like, if the corruption gets worse and worse and people are trying to devise like a, coup de grace, situation to try to make people, fight against each other, then I think it's just like a recipe gone wrong.
Yeah, I can understand that is. Whilst I may not, like I said, whilst I may not agree with the violent protests and stuff like that, because it's given ammunition to the far left to use against them, I do understand on the flip side of that why they've reacted aggressively. And it's been stoked by the, like I said, two-tier police system, because how the police act here, it's like they'll literally let these Palestinian protesters do anything they like, practically ask scot-free, protect them in all sorts, right? In other words, treat them to a different standard. But the moment it comes to that of the ones waving about their patriotic flags of Britain or the England flags or whatever, then they get different treatment. And that's not designed by accident. It goes back to that whole thing on the mass foreign immigration Frankfurt School technique of cultural Marxism. It's aimed at creating divide and conquer. It's aimed to stoke division, create distraction, subversion, and division tactics, basically. And I think you've been seeing that recently. It's and there was like I said, because I'm no the biggest fan of that, right? There he was, Tommy Robinson, pictured all in Cyprus, relaxing like he's no got a worry in the world whilst they're out protesting. Yeah, that just tells you everything.
Wow. Yeah, like I don't really hear too much about him, but like he always comes out with some very weird dramatical like topics.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with his other arguments, and it, don't get me wrong, stuff to do with the grooming gangs and stuff like that, and the pedophilia that's, an unfortunate problem that's existed in this country and the type of people they're letting in that's dangerous. And he's been right for calling out those specific things. I don't disagree with him on those things. My concern's always been down to, like I said earlier on, that contradiction, where if they support that stuff with dependency upon the state, well, it's kind of like a waste of time complaining about the self-serving political class, or the corrupt mainstream media and stuff like that, because it's like gone round and round in circles.
Yeah. I just think it makes perfect sense, because it's like, if people just like if people put themselves in a position to, think that there's one side to only bring a conversation to, and you're using some means of like counter intellectual bias to promote your ideas, then this is where like you have like the Mott and Bailey like effect, where people are just trying to use certain keywords to promote their message, to make it obvious, to show that, like, I don't really care about what I'm trying to, like, accomplish for everybody. I just want to have like a certain goal being put in place. And I think I see that over here in America, where like you have like the people like Steven Crowder, Lauren Southern, Tommy Lahren, like all those types of people that try to subvert language, and then they try to use a lot of deceptive practices to be very, counter bias. So, like it's already being shown, on that type of dichotomy.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting that, it's been a while since I've seen some of Stephen Crowder's videos and stuff like that. I've got nothing too much against him and that. Lauren Southern's this. How do I put her? It's like there's things about Lauren Southern I like, right? I've got a lot of respect for her as a person, but there's certain things that I would obviously disagree with, in particular. And it's interesting you mentioned about that thing today with the language that they use in particular. There was one thing that I disagreed with her on, and it was something to do with capitalism, and it's about today with heritage, and basically making it out as if capitalism would just destroy and get rid of all of that, as if they say capitalism would just sell it all off. And somebody that I was quite surprised by, actually, in his response. I think I can't remember what I watched it on. I think it was Yaren Brook or something. Yaren Brook, I think his name. I like the guy. I like, I respect and I agree with a lot of what he was speaking of on particular topic issues and what have you. But the one thing that I just felt I disagreed with was this idea that if you've got capitalism, it just means that you sell everything off. And that means no protection of anything culturally or your heritage, and that it's just, just sold off, and that's it, it's gone. That isn't the case. What capitalism does is it caters to where demand is. In other words, profits profits caters to the areas of the market where people's demand is, basically. And if you've got a population like here, for example, as you know, in Scotland, we've got a lot of stuff here relative to heritage and what have you. Like maybe it's conserving our wildlife, our wild landscape, like the Cairngorms region, or Loch Lomond and the Trossachs. These sort of places, or the lochs and that. When you have these groups, these conservation groups they don't just disappear because of a capitalist system. If anything, capitalism would cater where consumer demand is, and if you get a lot of people in Scotland, for example, that are strongly passionate of protecting specific things, and let me give you some recent examples that actually makes the favourable argument for capitalism in this sense. To give you a good example, you'd get your eyes open. So the first thing I've got to ask you is, are you aware of what Bannockburn Battlefield is?
I don't believe so. Who is that person?
Well, let me rephrase, are you aware of what the battlefield of Bannockburn is?
No, I don't believe so.
No. Have you watched Braveheart?
Oh, Braveheart. I think I've heard of that. Like, is that like a movie, right?
Yeah.
I don't think so, but I'll go check it out.
So a lot of people have already seen the film. For anybody that has seen the film, knows what Bannockburn is when I state, and what Bannockburn is the battlefield that was basically fought at the end of Braveheart. Okay, it wasn't fought where he took his sword, flung it, it lands in the grass, and then they just charge at the English, and then the end, and they fought like Scotsmen, and they won their freedom. All the rest of that. It was fought on the grounds of, it was basically fought on guerrilla warfare tactics, something that Scotland was really famous for, even dating back to the period when the Picts had fought the Romans. That's what frustrated the Romans, using it for centuries and centuries. Anyway, so the reason why I bring this up is because recently something was shared that there was apparently planning permissions that were granted, or I think granted, where they're going to be building, I think it's like a horse racing track or something like that, basically on the premises of where the battlefield is. Now, that's sacred land. That is land that should never be touched. That's a place that draws thousands, millions of tourists to come and see. That's the sacred battlefield that people come and see in Stirling to see, because it's where Scotland had won its freedom. It's where Robert the Bruce had defeated the English on that famous battlefield. And it's not just the Scots that lost their life. You're talking 10,000 English soldiers. So it's it's like, although you can see the graves all over, but you understand it's like this sort of maybe empty grassland, but it's like, it's in a sense, it's like a graveyard, right? Just like the way you have battlefields there. Well, this is the point, because if anything, what capitalism would do is it would go in the favour of the people, right? Because essentially the people would be the ones to dictate rather than a government. And the government doesn't seem to. I don't think it's even anywhere near in touch with the people. That's and it's a similar case even because I've seen a lot of angry people. It's a similar case to what's something that's going to be built. I think it's at the very southerly point of Loch Lomond. So Loch Lomond is one of the famous um, lochs just outside Glasgow. That a lot of people go and visit, tourists. And don't get me wrong, on this particular issue, I don't mind it as such, depending on what it is. I think it's something. I don't know if it's a theme park. I think it's something to do with. I can't even remember the name of the company is. They've got one down, I think in Sheffield or in the northern part of England. I can't even remember, but basically they're going to be putting something there. Again, there's a lot of people that are angry at that. So this is kind of the point that when it came to Lauren Southern, she was putting out a wrong message, in my personal opinion. It's a bit like, and again, I've got nothing against the guy, but Dan Bongino, I think his name is. I've got nothing against the guy, but I remember one time where he says that John D. Rockefeller was a monopolist. In other words, he's a conservative speaker who's putting out a wrong message to folk and saying to them that the likes of Rockefeller were these monopolists, and they weren't. They weren't monopolists at all, and that's the only issue. And like I say, I've got nothing against the likes of Lauren Southern, Dan Bongino, and those people. Just like I've got nothing against Jordan Peterson, but there are certain things that come out and say that I can't agree with.
Wow. Yeah, I just think like it just makes perfect sense of like having that type of, philosophical bias to promote certain ideals that favors, people's, ideology. Um I think like with people like Lauren Southern and those types is that they use a lot of counteractive bias to promote a deceptive means to say that, well, this is what is happening, but then they're not being honest about what the situation. And that's pretty much the same thing with people off of, what the left too, like people like Hassan Piker or people of that mindset. And it
Hmm.
just seems like they always play that, that bait and switch, tactic to say that this is exactly what you should be focusing on. And then when people keep listening to those types of people, they kind of use like the internet as like their means of trying to find truth. And I just think that creates like a really toxic, type of community of like people that try to listen to like people that have
Aye,
those. Yeah.
I can understand your point. To be fair to Lauren Southern on that particular topic, there was an interview I watched some of it. It was a very long, interview. I can't remember what the two interviewers are called again at their show, but they had Lauren Southern on, and I just I remember her speaking about, it must have been quite recent or something like that. I think it was something to do with the breakdown of her marriage and all the rest of this other stuff, and about people's views, social media. And to be fair to her, she did actually mention herself that social media can be very misleading and dangerous, that people people just typically just buy into a popular narrative and just go with it. And it kind of correlates to what you're saying about, you know, followers and stuff like that. I personally always openly, I look at things from different angles and that, and I put out arguments. Now, I'm just the sort of person that wouldn't put out arguments unless I'm certain about something. And that's it. But I always promote people do their independent research. That's something that I've long argued. It's always important to look at different things, different angles and stuff like that. And I've done that relative to, the economics and the economic political history and stuff like that. I can understand though. You will find the following can end up being misled. That's the issue.
Yeah, I've always kind of thought of it to be like that, and I just think especially with the libertarian spaces that I follow with, I've been having a issue with trying to be consistent with the right people, and it seems like that with social media, a lot of people like to utilize a lot of bias tactics to promote their ideals rather than being consistent. And I think it's just more to do with just having the proper consistency framework to have let the proper community put together to spread better philosophy.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And that was the thing because I remember, and this was a while back. I used to take and I'm gonna, and even now, I'm always open to hear people's arguments. I don't shut myself off, even on this particular argument I'm about to make. But at first, I stood in a position of, right, in terms of immigration, just open borders and stuff like that. And then I came across an argument that was shared to me on what you call decentralized immigration control, which is another libertarian argument for a sort of different perspective. And I watched and I looked at that argument on decentralized immigration control. And I think that's what kind of, changed my opinion on that particular issue because I was able to look at my own, original argument and then look at this argument and I was able to change position in that particular topic. And decentralized immigration control just really means that if hypothetically speaking, if you had, all land that was privately owned, well, it's a case where you require the permission on people's private property. You can't just walk onto somebody's private property and say or do whatever the hell you like. You would basically require, therefore, public property for that to exist to such an extent if there was such free movement. But then I seen the arguments about how you can have specified private property where it's solely designed for the purpose of such movement and stuff like that. That grants people that ability to. I think it's like you get the where supermarkets and shopping centres and stuff like that. Communities with specific private property that's designed for that for such free movement. But this is the issue. Just on an argument I had watched, I changed my position on my perception of immigration. And I'm always open, listening to people's arguments, because I just firmly believe that it's always important because if somebody's got something strong, if they've got a strong argument to come up with, it's good to take it on board. You know, I believe that. I firmly believe that. But the exception when it comes to socialism is a very different story because it's something I fully understand. It's something I fully grasp to comprehend why it does not work and the conflict of what happens if you're against the individual's rights and liberty. History's in certain circumstances like that, you can be absolutely damn well sure there's enough evidence to, to solidify your argument to say why it's wrong. If you get what I'm saying, but in certain circumstances, certain things, I've always been very open, and I think that's important. From a libertarian perspective, I've always been that way. Even when I listen to people's anarchists, arguments, because I would probably consider myself anarchist at heart, but minarchist by mind. So it's like I agree with so much of the arguments that anarchists make. I'm not one of those dogmatic people that shuts people off because they've got a different view or something. You know what I mean? I don't. For me, that doesn't solve anything. It doesn't solve, and it's just my belief that in order for libertarians to be closer together rather than divisive, there needs to be that sort of mentality. You know what I mean? Because I see it myself. There's certain times when I see certain people that are in the libertarian community and they seem to have so much conflict with each other. It's like, yeah, it's not worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I just haven't really been too active, really talking to too many people. And I used to like people like Dave Smith, and I probably say Eric July, but I feel like those voices are not being consistent. And I think the people that are the ones that are actually being honest about principle and philosophy. But it's just like too many people are misconstruing ideas, and a lot of people just like
Yeah,
to do like the weird debate bro arguments to try to say like, well, this is why I'm right and you're wrong. But it's like the truth
yeah.
is like, if you're not creating a foundational means of a discussion to understand who's right and wrong, then nobody's not going to be right. But the people that are going to be right are the ones that are actually staying consistent.
And don't get me wrong, there's some exceptions. I can understand your point there that, yeah, there are certain people that will misconstrue things and pass off certain things as being, like, for example, some people passing off the mixed economy as a capitalist economy, or like when people say a well-regulated capitalism, it's like no such thing exists. So that's the sort of things that I feel that certain people misconstrue, and that's an exception. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's just mostly due to the mainstream arguments that people like to cling on to. And like it's always going after like the people that are more like less knowledgeable on having a honest conversation, and then they just try to like go off of what somebody else try to say. But I like I personally like talking with people like you and other creators on YouTube, or just people that are just knowledgeable in general, where you know there's like a good base of constructive argumentation that's put into the discussion, and
Mhm.
people can like go back and forth to talk about whether or not if that's like a good or like a good idea to actually support or not.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand. And it's always good to have, people's different, perceptions on different things, and I agree, with that in particular.
Yeah. But yeah, but I don't want to like hold up like your time if you gotta go. I just wanted to kind of like ask you like a couple questions of like how you think things are going with like current like events. But I just figured I have a good conversation. So
Yeah, it's never a problem, mate. I'm always more than happy. It's just how things are the day, just the way things have been. I know it's the riots and stuff like that have spread, especially across the news, no doubt all there in the United States, and I wouldn't be surprised by that. Um, Funny enough, I've not really seen too much of what's been going on in the US. Just I do see, certain things here and there. For example, I think I seen somebody sharing. What was it? It must have been a video of. Is her name Kamala Harris or something like that?
oh
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know. Well, Kamala Harris. I think it was something somebody shared about being against guns and how she's going to go after them or something like that. How she's going to. I seen somebody saying, "Like, good luck with that." I think you know what I mean. But yes, honestly, see if she ever even dare tried that, she would create. She would honestly create civil war within the United States.
Yeah,
She honestly would.
yeah. Just like another. I forgot who was that one lady back in like the '90s that was trying to do like the same thing, but she worked in Congress and she was like an absolute evil piece of crap. I'm actually trying to think of it right now.
I mean, I thought Hillary Clinton, or sometimes I call her Hitler Clinton,
Hitler Clinton.
basically. I thought she was bad. Like that Kamala Harris honestly sounds like a right nutcase.
Oh wow.
I mean,
Yeah, that's very interesting. But yeah, but I definitely like to do this like again. Like I just wanted to just come on and just have like a little conversation for today.
it's not a problem at all, mate. I'm always more than happy. You know, when I've got the free time and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Any time and that, it's just it's only because of the weekends was football has been on, and because of the what was it, the Tuesday or something like that, the Champions League qualifier where Rangers were playing, so I was obviously occupied with that. But I'm always more than happy anytime you organise all that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I actually wanted to see if you could do like a show with that other libertarian YouTuber by the name of Fabian Liberty. Like I like to see you guys like talk someday.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to. That's the thing.
Okay. Like I'll send a DM like I'll send a message out to him and then I'll like talk with him like about it.
No problem.
Alrighty. I appreciate the conversation. If you got anything that you want to say for last words, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've basically covered it a fair bit, and at the end of the day, keep faith, because all I've got to say is I've said this before, economics dictates everything. You know, it's just like what I say, you know, to folk, it doesn't matter who they vote in, put, you know, power, whether it's, you know, the Labour Party, SNP, or, you know, over there in the United States, it doesn't matter who they vote in. Ultimately, what dictates everything is the study of economics, and economic reality cannot be argued with. And the truth of the matter is, these politicians can make all the promises in the world. They can mouth off all they want and say all the crap that they want, but ultimately it dictates everything is whether you've got the money to pay for stuff or not. That's economic reality, and you know, at the end of the day, I've got full faith, as I said, that there's probably a lot more people out there than you realise who are in favour of, you know, freeing, especially the United States, and reducing the size and power of the state. I've got no doubt about that. I do believe that.
Yeah, I agree. You know, like I don't want my future to be, you know, to be destroyed. I want to live life and just, you know, enjoy what I have. You know, don't live in economic disparity.
100%, mate. You know, that's it. Completely agree.
Yeah, I just figured I needed to have this conversation because you know, like I don't like to, you know, keep myself inside a echo chamber. So
Yeah, it's of course not, mate. It's I can fully understand that.
yeah. But yeah, but I'll definitely, you know, do this like again. I appreciate the like the conversation and you know, like until next time.
Yep, definitely. Right.
All right. I will see you later.
Right, talk to you later, man.
Yes, sir. All right, guys. Yeah, so this is pretty much just like a little show that I wanted to do, just to you know have like something different for the channel. I mostly do gaming and sports on the channel, but I will you know sometimes you know from time to time have something you know set up like this, you know, with Scott. Like you know just to have like general discussion on like current like events and like other stuff. But I appreciate people for coming in to let the chat. Topher, thank you for coming through. Kiri Geary, Kieran, thank you for coming by. I don't usually do these type like you know type of shows. Like I mostly do gaming, but I will you know come out with like my usual content. But yeah, shout out to D1. Um, I don't think I know that person, but I'm pretty sure like I do. Thank you for coming by, PBH Big Dog. You know, thank you. Topher said, yeah, like I think getting rid of guns is a good idea in a vacuum, but something is underused. You can't just take it instantly with no consequences until, well, unless you're super authoritarian. Yeah, like I have like a different viewpoint, but I think it's more to do with you know like the long term like effects. And then he said if you try to take something out, you get the American prohibition. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I mean, you know, that's like a good example of like how that fundamental goes, but yeah, like I appreciate people for coming by. Like I have to get going, but I have more content coming out, and definitely stay tuned. And thank you guys for coming by. And here's the outro. All right, I'll see you guys. All right.